Good afternoon, good evening. This is If Data Could Talk. My name's Andy Cotgreave, technical evangelist at Tableau, and I have a co-host with me today, Keisha. Say hello to everybody. Tell us who you are and how come you're co-hosting with me today.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for that intro. I'm a developer advocate or evangelist, if you will. We're kind of both evangelists, really. But today we're here for the second of 3 special episodes where we get to go and find out what was going on in the minds of our Iron Viz contestants. And just in case you guys don't know about Iron Viz, it's the world's largest data visualization competition, hands down. And every year it ignites and showcases the power of Tableau and the Tableau community. And this year we had 3 finalists from hundreds of submissions, and they advanced to show us off at an Iron Viz championship where they competed against each other for a large amount of money, I believe, also. And that was at Tableau Conference-ish.
Fantastic. And of course, what we forgot to say there is you and I co-host the event live.
We do that as well.
We do. So it's great to have you with us on If Data Could Talk. And we're going to press play on one of the 20-minute builds in a moment. But first, we need a contestant. So we have our second runner-up. It's Simon Beaumont. Simon, welcome to If Data Could Talk. Do you want to just give a brief intro to the audience about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Andy. Hey, Keisha. So I'm Simon Beaumont. I'm a Tableau ambassador and Zen master. Work in JLL as our BI Centre of Excellence Director. Unashamed geek, bald, just get all the key stuff out of the way.
All things we love about you, Simon. It's great to have you on the show. Are you ready to talk us through your build? We're desperate to find out. So we're gonna go through this build in 20 minutes, and we're just going to talk about some of the moments, but also some of the other meta action that's going on in Iron Viz. Simon, straight away, you went into the preferences file. What's going on here?
Yeah, so I used a custom color palette for my Viz. So to do that, I wanted to save some time, so use the preference file to load it in. So when I opened it, I can just automatically use it as one of the custom color palettes that appears in my marks card.
Nice. I loved how all 3 contestants did different things with the color palettes. You did preferences. Alex did an image with a color picker, and Christian copy pasted hex codes. I think your way was fastest. Just saying.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and it's also one that we use a lot of work. So we've got custom color palettes, so it needs to be core to everything we do in Tableau Desktop at work. So kind of I took the business world and put it into Iron Viz a bit.
Oh, I like what you did there. I like what you did. Yeah, custom color palettes and preferences. Google that if you need to find out that tip. So you do a bunch of setup in the workbook to start off with. So tell us about the data journey. Well, tell us about the Tableau, the data journey, right? You've got quite a challenge with Iron Viz. Were you using Tableau Prep?
Yeah, so I did. So I think the first thing that came to mind for me is you're given a massive data set. So it's a data set that I've never seen before. It's a topic that I'm aware of because I live in the world and I'm passionate about kind of pollution and the environment, but it's not something that I'm an expert in. So the first thing I had to do really is that data exploration, that doing what Tableau does best, chuck it in there, see what the data shows. I think probably there were about 10 journeys I went down to work out I'd love to do that story and found the data didn't match it. So it was really that kind of iterative process of time after time after time, testing the data, seeing where I could get to, and then refining it down. I think one of my biggest learning journeys was you can't viz everything. So especially in 20 minutes, you have to find a story that works for the stage. You can't worry about there's a bit of the data you're not using.
I think for people who may not have seen Iron Viz the final, and if you haven't, there's links below. Do go and watch the actual competition. The contestants build the Viz live and then get a chance to do a 3-minute story, right? So there's very little you can do in 3 minutes. I think it was good. So how stressful was it, Simon, trying to narrow down that and thinking, am I on the right path?
Yeah, well, I had hair before we started. So for the first 2 days, I would say I was a bit like a rabbit in a headlight. So I was overwhelmed with, I've only got a limited period of time to get this build and this design done. But actually, as probably with every Viz that anyone ever does in Tableau, as soon as you've found your angle, that's probably the most difficult part of the journey. So once I had found my story, once I'd committed to the data, actually it was then doing what I love, which is just playing about with Tableau, building a viz. So that was probably the least stressful part. For me, the worst bit was that initial kind of exploration of where do I go with it.
Do you think that reflects a real business challenge? Because generally you've got an end use case, whereas Iron Viz, or is this an Iron Viz and Tableau Public problem? Right, or do you have that kind of thing in business as well?
Yeah, I think we do it in business all the time, because quite often the user will set us a scenario, but you need to explore whether the data can support you in that journey. So it was probably a more exploratory, open conversation piece in Iron Viz, because you go where you want to go, whereas the business takes you with what the requirements are. But it was the same kind of concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, Keisha, I think we watched this. Is this the beginning of the crazy stacked bar chart? Is that what we're doing here?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, this is the bar.
Yes.
And then actually the reason because I remember when Keisha and I were watching this the first time, we're like, oh, it's a scatter plot, and then it's a bar chart, and then it starts evolving into something else, and it's like, hang on. If you want to build a stacked bar chart, don't you just choose a stacked bar chart? But I guess you're doing a lot more crazy stuff here, Simon, than the defaults.
Yeah, so this was really interesting for me. So this is probably my most enjoyable part of the exploration and design process. So what I wanted to do here was show my capital cities, the level of pollution, but also reflect the number of people that lived in the city. So naturally, you would say when you are looking at visualizing two measures across a dimension, you'd probably normally go for a scatter plot. But in reality, if you've got a load of cities that have got a similar size of proportion of population, sometimes the scatter can become crowded. So you lose the clarity of the plots because they're all overlapping. So I chose deliberately to do a sized bar chart so that I gave some proportion to what each city related to, the number of people that live there.
And notice he said side bar chart, Andy, not Marimekko chart.
All right. Is this a Marimekko chart? Look, can we put this to bed, or is it not a Marimekko chart? Keisha says no. Simon says.
I say no, but I will be corrected by people.
I claimed it was a Marimekko chart, but I bow down to everybody else who's told me it isn't. So it looks cool. I love how it's great. You're like, it was a scatter plot, then it was a sticky little bar chart, then things were overlapping. It's like the overlapping bar, Simon, what are you thinking? And then boom, at some point this moment happens where you're like, aha. And each bar represents a city. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
And it's pointing downwards. Why? Don't bar charts go up, Simon?
Yes, a good challenge. But for me, when you go into the final viz, you always start top left. So I think, Andy, you did kind of the eye tracking seminars a few years ago. You're kind of human nature is you start top left at a viz. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating some stacked bars that start with the number of population, or the proportion of population that lives in pollution that is within the WHO limits, and then I expand down one level further, and then I get to the bars. Cool. So I wanted to start similar concept to bands, big statement at the top, which is the bigger stack, kind of the single, just two colors, then break it down another step, and then break it down into the city. So you're kind of layering the onion at every time.
That's fantastic. Another thing I liked about this is, again, this is a stacked bar. I can build a stacked bar with a dimension, a measure, and show me. And yet you've got dual axes and measures going on everywhere, right? I find Iron Viz fascinating because you know the finalists are always finding ways to kind of extend the defaults in order to achieve other things. One particular aspect here was you had two marks. You know, why is there a mark in the background that's currently invisible? What's going on there?
So that was a complete hack, probably, to my point, and I'll probably be told you could have done it in one mark. But for me, speed, I wanted to just focus on the kind of ease of use and ease of build. I wanted to label the individual segments of the bar, but I didn't want the segments to be over the text because I didn't feel it was particularly easy to read. So by doing a dual axes, one of the axes becomes the bar, the second axis becomes the label. So then I could position the label above the bar to give that clarity of read.
Nice.
I feel like we've seen a lot of labeling tricks, Andy.
I think so too. I think we're going to have to show this video to the developer team and to be like, look at the pinch points for these speedrunners.
Also, Simon, how did you choose this color palette? I really like it, but I especially liked that the darker purple was really only for one city. Was that Beijing, I think, remember?
Yeah, so the concept was inspired by the Financial Times. They did an air pollution viz on India, I think it was, in terms of Indian cities. Or sorry, cities around the world, and just used colours to really stand out. So this is a colour palette that I actually found, and I apologise that I can't remember the person I need to give credit to on Tableau Public. But there was someone that published a load of different colour palettes to Tableau Public, and I think this one is Plasma. And it really stood out for me in terms of that it's a diverging color palette, but in reality, you can get segments that are quite distinct. So it allowed me to say the yellow, which is, if you like, the good stuff, actually, to be fair, kind of nicely blended into the background, because the darker colors then were what drew your attention to it.
Yeah, that's great. Now, I think there's a moment coming up when you build a dual axis. I have to ask you a question. In fact, here it is. Right. Have you ever built a dual axis where the first thing you did was not synchronize them?
Being honest, no.
No, right.
Really short answer, no.
It's something I've noticed watching Iron Viz this year and previous years, and then noticing my own behavior. I'm like, I wish the default was just synchronized and then go the other way. Yeah.
And on these, just one thing to call out on these, and it's something that I learned a lot from people like Ryan Sleeper and Cole. So you'll notice that I only label the beginning and end of the bar, or the beginning and end of the plot. So all the points in between I just strip out, because ultimately you don't need to know it. So it's something I deliberately choose to try and reduce the data ink ratio.
I have already taken that as inspiration in the work I've been doing in the last 3 weeks since Iron Viz. And what's the technique you used for doing it?
So I blogged about it actually just before Iron Viz, because I did it as part of one of my feeders that I was lucky enough to get into the final with. So you actually you can only realistically easily do it when you've got a fixed axis that never changes. So if your Viz is dynamic, you get into a little bit more challenge because you have to use reference lines to be able to do it. But for this instance, you'll see on screen here, I set the fixed origin of 0 and then the end point is 0.06. And then if you set the axis interval to 0.06, you automatically hide all the points in between. So relatively easy to do once you kind of get your head around it.
Yeah, and if it's a dynamic range, you have to do a min reference line and a max reference line, and then slightly hack the labeling to make it look like an axis.
Yeah, possibly not one for 20 minutes in Iron Viz, I thought.
Not with all the other things you wanted to achieve in this build.
Now, going back to that Viz you just finished, I noticed, and I also see in your calculations too, you've specified certain locations specifically, like Bolivia, right? China was one of them specifically. What was the idea around pulling out those areas?
So one of the first things that I challenged myself to do is, did I want to do an exploratory Viz, or did I want to do a guided analytics Viz? And for me, the data wasn't quite complete enough to be able to allow people to explore in a way that I felt stayed integral to showing the data correctly. So as an example, the points for the United States were primarily in country parks or in national parks. They weren't in inner cities. So I felt as if I gave people the ability to explore every city, you would be comparing, for want of a better English term, apples and pears. So actually I decided to focus on the stories that I knew held true with the data. So I was guiding people through a story that I believed in and I felt had integrity in the analytics.
I think do you think you can win at Iron Viz with an exploratory dashboard?
I think you could. So I think looking back at what Hesham did last year, I would say that was exploratory because he focused on a theme and then allowed people to explore within it. It's just I decided to go down, when you go down to 33 cities, actually, one of the things I wish I'd have done is allow people to hover over and see a Viz and tooltip on the bars, which was the main part of Viz, because that may have allowed people to explore it beyond just the boundaries of what I was picking as a story.
Good answer. What do you think, Keisha?
I agree. I think you have to give a little bit of the ability to change things and play around and mess around. But once you find those stories, it's worth sharing, those individual nuggets of insight.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think all three contestants, you're right, this year and last year built something. I mean, particularly Lindsay last year was complete. That was a business dashboard, right? Amazing. I sometimes think that there's an opportunity, I think, somehow in Iron Viz to go completely down the explanatory and build something that wouldn't work on Tableau Public, that wouldn't work without the story. But if you could just nail it and be like, I'm going to tell you this story through data, just to build it for that 3-minute story, the 3-minute moment, that'd be incredible. To be extremely hard and far beyond my abilities. But I haven't seen that happen yet. Right. Okay, so you're bringing things together now. You used the background image. This was the big hack all three of you used this year. Some people thought that was controversial. What do you think? Why did you choose to do the background image?
Well, if it's controversial, I just remember the amount of conversations that go on Twitter and Tableau community about, do we want to see people just doing formatting for the first 5 minutes? That's personally not what I watch Iron Viz for. I get inspired by the chart types, the creation and the design. So for me, it was a massive relief when I got my design. So I actually built the design in Tableau and then exported the dashboard as an image from Tableau. So actually,
are you serious?
Yeah. So all the design are individual text boxes that I then created as a dashboard, exported it as an image, so I knew it would render correctly on screen. And then the thing that I think possibly people wouldn't recognize is in the top left-hand corner, there's a 1x1 pixel box where all the text has been loaded into, so that when you load it up on Tableau Public from an accessibility point of view, people that are visually impaired would still be able to read it and hear it by it being played back to them.
What? That's amazing.
Yeah.
And was that in the build as well? Did that happen in? Blimey.
Yeah, so it was right at the beginning. I just dropped in the text box, chucked a load of text in and put it in the top left so it's hidden. But that meant from an accessibility point of view, I could be sure that anyone could engage the Viz and actually appreciate the Viz for what it is.
Is that something you can do in a business environment?
Yeah, I fundamentally believe that.
But does that text, can you build it so that text varies according to what the data is saying?
No, well, in theory, I guess you could do, because ultimately it's a text box. So if you put things such as parameters or fields into that text string, then the reader would read out loud what's the text in the box. So you could do it dynamically. I didn't choose to because my Viz was fairly fixed in terms of the text. You could.
Wow. That's amazing. All right. Now, we have started on this is what I love about Iron Viz. You are now embarking with about 4 minutes left to go. You've brought in a new data set, at which point I saw this as wow, new data set. This is a bit late. And this data set exists purely for you to build an interactive path. So why? And did this feel like a path of madness or just the right thing to do? I mean, the outcome is great, right?
I wanted to create something that leveraged storytelling, but I wanted to do it in a slightly different way. So I used parameter actions to be able to drive stories. So you click on it, but then also I wanted a lot of the text that supports my stories to be in the tooltips. So it was inspired by Ken, Zen Master, everyone famous. He actually did a Viz recently where it's kind of horizontal storytelling. So you clicked on it, it went to another point. That just sparked something in my mind of, you could do storytelling via 4 points. So I've got 4 stories to tell, one about Norway, one about La Paz, one about China, and one about big does not necessarily mean bad. So I wanted to create a circle alongside each one that would then drive the user to say there's more here. And it's kind of that way I could create the storytelling element of the Viz, but also make it interactive.
That's brilliant. How much iteration though did it make to find a data set, to position the bars, to you've got this massive chicken egg situation where you're building the Viz out and then you've got to plot these circles in the right place. Was it? I mean, it was worthwhile because it worked great.
Yeah, so deliberately, it was the very last thing I did when the design process. So once I had actually 4 points that were just 1, 2, 3, 4. Obviously, they didn't line up. So I created it so it technically worked. And then I amended the 1, 2, 3, 4 to be points. I think it was 1, 1.8, 2.6, and 4, which meant it nicely lined up with the story points of the actual text on the right-hand side.
Amazing.
And what about these lines here you're adding to the bar charts? I always wondered what that was for.
So I've got to be honest, Keisha, absolutely no analytical value whatsoever. This was just the perfectionist in me wanting to make something that looked nice. So rather than doing anything fancy with module actions, to create the illusion of a white script, what that did was it said the labels are at the top. So I kind of tried to separate out the labels with the bar. So the white script was just trying to separate out the bar. But just a hack again, just do a white line over the top of the bar to make it appear as though there was a nicely separated top and bottom.
Love it. Another one of these little things. Tell me about the color legend, because that's not a not a standard positioned color legend either. There's a nice trick you made there.
So again, that was actually so when I did the original, because that's part of the background image, but when I did the original background image, that was actually a sheet. So you might know they're 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so they're multiples, and then there's a gap to the 8. So actually that was a continuous plot, so a continuous sheet with squares on. And I deliberately chose to show the white space of 5, 6, 7, because I felt it accentuated the outline of Beijing. So it actually drew your attention to the legend has got a gap in it.
That's amazing. And I believe, is that us?
I think so.
That's finished, right?
I think that's it.
Oh, Simon, that went so quickly.
Yeah, it's easier to watch back than it was to do.
All right, so we finished. So I think there's a few questions I'm sure Keisha and I both have just to ask about some of the other choices you made and the process. I'll ask a couple, but I'll ask one, and then Keisha, do you want to come in after that? How many times did you do a dry run of this?
I reckon about 15 in the end. So I started. When I first did the first month I did, I think it was about 27 minutes, and that was when my face went white, and I just realised what I was facing. But actually, you'll notice along the way of the build, there were things like I duplicated sheets, and the reason I duplicated sheets is because by duplicating the sheet once one is built, it retains a lot of the underlying formatting and the underlying options that I've selected. So it means I didn't have to repeat it for every single sheet. So when I did little things such as compartmentalize it down to rinse and repeat the same thing, it kind of, after about 10, I was down to 20 minutes, and I was like, I don't really want to be that tight. So the last kind of day or two was primarily about really finessing it to get down to the 19-minute mark. And the thing I found made the biggest difference, and I probably don't appreciate this in the workplace, is depending on the order of what you build, really impacts the speed of how you build it. So if you're constantly going back and forth doing different things, whereas if you package it all up and do one thing multiple times, you're a lot quicker.
But it's interesting. But Iron Viz doesn't always represent the real world, does it? Because when you're in the flow, you're like, I'm going to do a bit of formatting, then a bit of this, then a bit of analytics, then bring some more data in, right? So that's one of the differences I think between Iron Viz and daily analytics live.
Although I did do something in Iron Viz which I wish I did more of in the workplace, which is set the defaults of the workbook. So in addition to doing the preference files, just if you know you're never going to use grid lines, if you know you always want your reference lines to be a certain color and a certain depth, do them in the workbook first before you start. And I just wish I practiced that more and more in the workplace.
Yeah, I normally build 25 worksheets, try and format one, and then end up going back through all 25 about 16 times as I try and tweak it. Keisha, Keisha, what questions have you got for Simon?
I was curious about how it was working with your supervisor, and I know you guys are tied with the preparation. Like, what parts were they helpful with?
Yeah, so I've got to say a massive shout out to Courtney. I was really proud to have her as my supers. I only found out when we did our initial intros. I found out at that point she had previously worked for JLL as well. I didn't have the pleasure of working with her then, but that was kind of a nice icebreaker in terms of, we've all been through kind of the same journey in our professional career. But yeah, Courtney was massively helpful, bouncing ideas off of, challenging. So one of the first things I want to do, my go-to place is quite often a long form viz. So if you look at my Tableau Public profile, quite often they're not nicely packaged on one screen. And I was desperate to try and do a long form viz and Iron Viz, but in reality, that really wouldn't have worked when I'm trying to save my 3-minute journey and scroll up and down the screen. So having someone that just brought me back to what's the core of what I'm trying to do, what's the core of that's going to work well on screen, I was massively appreciative of that. And Courtney deserves a massive kind of pat on the back and credit. And I know the pride that everyone that's a supervisor takes, but seriously, all Courtney and the rest of the gang that did it this year should be really proud of what they achieved.
It's a great team we had this year.
Yeah, indeed.
Fantastic.
Any other questions, Keisha?
No, go ahead, Andy.
No, all right. I one of the other contestants was one of your team members who you manage. So Alex told us, well, you said all sorts of nice things about you, which went live. You said you're a great boss. How was it? Was it a strange work situation? Be like, oh, we're both in this big competition, and it's going to take a lot of both of our times in the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, the moment I found out that Alex was in the final was just a bit of a surreal moment. So it was kind of that meeting of the minds in terms of, we're going to go through this together. And actually, it was genuinely really nice. But so yeah, I have the pleasure of working with Alex every day, and Alex inspires me with his skills, his ability to design. I think that came out in his build in terms of there is no way on this earth that build that Alex did would ever have crossed my mind in terms of being possible. And that's what I see every day. But the nice thing was, actually, I knew Christian as well from the community. So in reality, it wasn't a case of I worked with Alex and we were in it together. The three of us, the amount of times we jumped on the call and just had a bit of a laugh and a joke virtually just to keep each other sane.
Yeah,
it was really nice, and I really valued that.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll wrap up with one question. You know, it's a couple of weeks since the competition, and I'm just interested in, you know, your reflections on the experience. You know, I know you've been active in the community for getting on probably over 5 years now. You know, so you achieved this incredible goal of becoming an Iron Viz finalist. Congratulations. You know, what are your reflections? And for people watching thinking, should I have a go? What's your advice to them?
So my overwhelming feel, I guess, is one of pride. Because I know how special it is to be up there on, whether it be the virtual stage or the physical stage. For me, it's always one of the highlights of TC is seeing the buzz that I get of what people can do in 20 minutes and the different ways that people can take data. And just a massive shout out to the events team this year for even being able to try and do that virtually. I absolutely, maybe not the dancing, but I love the start of kind of that personal connection and seeing all the videos about what all of us were and what our day-to-day lives were. For anyone that wants to do it, I would say don't be afraid. So there's a couple of things. This was actually my 6th time of entering, whether it be the global one or the European one. So don't get downhearted. There can only ever be 3 people on stage. And I would just say, try again, because I actually love the feeder competitions because it's my chance to embrace the viz and just embed and immerse myself in it for probably 4 weeks solid. You don't get to do that very often. But I promise people, if they want to do it, it's genuinely really good fun. You're doing what you love, which is vizzing. You don't probably get the pressure of doing it in 20 minutes very often. But once you get your head around that, it's actually really good fun.
Yeah, amazing. All right. Well, on that, I think it's probably time to wrap up. I'm loving doing these episodes, right? And Keisha, do we have one more episode left after this? Who's next?
That's true. It's true. We have our finale, the winner, Christian Felix.
Yeah. So that's going to come up. That'll be sometime next week, we expect. Simon, thank you so much for giving us the insight. I think this is another great thing we've had the opportunity to do this year is dig into the inside, what's going on inside the minds of the contestants. So thank you so much for your time. To everybody watching, we hope this has inspired you, whether you're new to Iron Viz or an old hand. If you want to see a Viz like this in your inbox every day, then head over to Viz of the Day. This is where we will send you a beautiful piece of data storytelling built and published on Tableau Public every single day. And you just get a huge variety of content. Create a Tableau Public profile. We've got links to those below. And make sure you follow all of our finalists, Simon, Christian, and Alex, because they're some of the best at Tableau in the world because they made it to Iron Viz, and what they do is sure to inspire you. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I'm sure the three of us have. Have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are, and we will see you next time with Christian Felix. Take care. Bye.